What's up everyone, it's Indy, and I thought the news for the weekend was done and I'd be free to lounge in my underwear, but it turns out Hollywood just keeps getting worse. So in this video, let's talk about how Kathleen Kennedy's Star Wars future might be in dire trouble, and how Sound of Freedom is crushing the box office way better than anyone expected, and DC Comics' Blue Beetle might be their next disaster. So let's start with Indiana Jones first, with Bounding Into Comics reporting. James Mangold derides fans as divisive for not liking his deconstruction of Indiana Jones in the Dial of Destiny. As I reported in my previous video, Indiana Jones has become one of the largest box office bombs of this year. And it's extra bad considering Indy 5 was supposed to be Disney's huge tentpole movie for the summer season. Think of it like Disney's Avengers level release to put it into perspective. But not only for it to do horribly, but to have damage control get this bad proves that this is going awful for Disney. And especially Kathleen Kennedy, who was responsible for the decisions that led to this. Anyway, James Mangold, who directed Indy 5, has been notoriously documented well before its release to be spiteful of fans, and would openly attack the audience for having any issue with his movies.
Wise enough to see the criticisms of their films, and then keep the things that are criticized and change other things.
One of these concerned fans was Matthew Kaddish of SaltyNerd.com, who back in June 2021 said he didn't think Mangold or Kathleen Kennedy would be the right people to bring Indy into the modern era. In his tweet, he would say things like Spielberg was not directing it and Kennedy would be producing it. And he's not wrong, since Indy 5 is the first time Spielberg wouldn't be the director of the Indy movies. Anyway, this one tweet sent James Mangold into a rage where he replied, "Thanks Matt, keep making the world a better place crapping on things in the first week of production from your basement. Never seen a script by John, nothing against him, just reality. Butterworth and I started from a blank page, and 1 in 3 are hugely talented and all by my side." Thankfully, John Kasdan didn't write Indy 5 after all, since he was responsible for the Disney Plus misfire that was Willow, that now technically no longer exists. Anyway, now 2 years later and the full release behind us, Mangold has gone into damage control mode. Mangold spoke to The Hollywood Reporter where he said, and I quote, "Life is filled with peaks and valleys, and I appreciate when my fictional heroes such as Indy have their own ups and downs. So why does a segment of the audience seem to want these legacy characters to be infallible? I just can't figure out why anyone would want such little drama." Well, there's a point where these characters become symbols more than characters. And so there becomes this anxiety that if you examine the humanity of a hero, you somehow weaken them. And honestly, I can't speak for how fans relate and wrestle with these questions in relation to other movies, but certainly in relation to mine, I think your question almost has my answer built into it. I mean, I think you're in a sense already addressing it. Good drama gives a hero a problem. If a movie is about a beautiful hero who is capable of anything and is virtually indestructible and is without any personal issues or concerns, then you just have a fashion video with action. I am a fan of starting a character in one place to go to another. Movies are a continuum. By definition, in drama, a character starts in one place and ends up in another. So if people want to be divisive in the age of social media, they can focus on where a character starts, as opposed to where they end. In reality, for Harrison, who's playing this character, he's tracing an arc and he's changing through the whole picture. So it all depends on where you're landing and where you are pointing your finger on that timeline. By showing him in his most hardy and then finding him at 70 in New York City, it produces for the audience a kind of wonderful whiplash of how they're going to have to readjust and retool their brains for this guy. His past is a live memory for the audience, hanging over a man who is now living with anonymity in a world that no longer cares or recognizes the things he felt so deeply about. You're left with a multi-layered perception of his character, both what he was and what he is, and how the world is different between the first 20 minutes of the movie." End quote. I think James Mangold was trying to apply what he calls as deconstruction to Indy the same way he did when he made Logan. He wanted to take a character that was larger than life and deliver a story that challenges the hero while they exist in their old age. But the difference here was that Logan was marketed correctly and didn't go through a million rewrites with 6 different endings. And now it seems like Kathleen Kennedy's future for Star Wars is in jeopardy as well.
He's bitching about Star Wars. Is he alt-right?
I
love Star Wars.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Very cool.
TheGamer.com, who's a frequent guest of this channel due to their moronic takes, for once actually made an article I somewhat agree with. I know, crazy, but I guess a broken clock really is right twice a day. They propose if Indy 5's massive failure will lead to Mangold's Dawn of the Jedi movie getting axed, and it's very likely if history repeats itself. Disney has a history of stripping movies out of directors' hands if their previous project fails. A good example of this would be Colin Trevorrow, who was set to direct Star Wars Episode 9, which when he was still attached, the movie would have been called Duel of the Fates. Anyway, his previous movie, Book of Henry, bombed hard, and Disney took Episode 9 from him and gave it back to J.J. Abrams. And let's not forget when the showrunners of Game of Thrones were being hired by Disney to make a new Star Wars trilogy. But after those guys rushed the finale to Game of Thrones and in a lot of fans' eyes ruined the franchise once it was all said and done, Disney cancelled their contract and those movies never came to be. And we can't forget when Disney fired the previous directors on Solo and replaced them, even though that did little to fix that movie's problems. The point is that James Mangold is currently in the same position as all of the people I explained above, only his failure money-wise is way worse than the others. James Mangold said his Dawn of the Jedi movie would be a biblical epic about the dawn of the Force and how it's discovered. He basically wants to reverse his deconstruction of Indy and Logan and do it at the beginning of a franchise instead. And like I said, if Disney's track record is anything to follow, his movie won't happen and it'll be pried from his cold dead hands soon. This just means that Indy 5 is yet another Kathleen Kennedy disaster that will damage not only the Indy brand, but it will affect and ruin Star Wars as well. She really does ruin everything she touches these days. It's truly incredible. And speaking of things Disney got rid of, let's talk about Sound of Freedom some more, which I reported in my previous video as beating Indy 5's box office on July 4th. The movie was made for $14 million and has now grossed close to $30 million. And while this is great news since the film was never meant to come out when Disney bought it from Fox, it means the creators get to enjoy their huge success. And while Freedom denounces and exposes child trafficking, a lot of websites have started up this weird damage control narrative, where multiple sites are trying to claim that Freedom's story and the people behind it are conspiracy theorists and right-wing lunatics. Rolling Stone in particular has been getting a lot of heat for their article titled, "Sound of Freedom is a superhero movie for dads with brain worms." And weirdly enough, it's not the only website that's echoing this narrative. Even The Guardian has chimed in and has also tried to make Freedom seem like it's a bad movie full of conspiracies. The Guardian tried to spin this massive success into a failure by saying, quote, "Sound of Freedom has over-delivered on expectations in dollars and cents, a feat of profitability uncommon for a comparatively low-budget production without a major Hollywood-led promotional campaign. Judging by the robust round of applause that concluded the fully seated screening I attended on Wednesday evening and this, in the liberal Sodom of Manhattan, it would seem that the folks at the 2-year-old Angel Studios have tapped into a substantial and eagerly marshaled viewership. Following that money leads back to a more unsavory network of astrophist boosterism among the far-right fringe. A constellation of paranoids now attempting to spin a cause celebratory out of a movie with vaguely simpatico leanings," end quote. This rhetoric is very common on these websites as well, and it's not surprising that these places refuse to cover it despite its huge success. Honestly, Freedom is the movie equivalent boycotting of Hogwarts Legacy to a degree. It's another piece of media that is greatly benefiting from the general audience because it doesn't bend the knee to woke nonsense and actually tells a story that deserves to be told. And by these journalism websites like Hollywood Reporter, Guardian, and more trying to denounce it, it's creating the Streisand effect all over again like it did with Hogwarts Legacy, and it'll just lead to more people watching it. And let's not forget that it's extremely weird in telling of these publications that a film about protecting and saving kids is somehow bad in their eyes. Don't forget that The Guardian, which didn't like Sound of Freedom, gave Cuties a 4 out of 5 stars, calling it bold, flawed, and misunderstood. And it's even weirder that The Guardian outright defends Cuties and tries to say people should watch something before having an opinion on it. Yet they got mad about Sound of Freedom. Weird that a liberal-leaning website would applaud a movie that exploits kids, but hate a movie about protecting them. I wonder what the Hollywood Reporter gave Cuties. Oh look, they liked it, of course they did. They even said, there nonetheless are plenty of reasons to keep watching, from the vibrancy of the visuals to the youthful vitality of the preteen actors and the feverishly excitability with which the movie captures young female friendship. It doesn't surprise me that nothing gets a woke journalist's loins going than a movie that shows underage children twerking with barely any clothes on. And it's sadly on brand that they have problems with movies that want to protect kids. I wonder what RogerEbert.com gave Sound of Freedom. Oh, it's 2 stars. Well, that's not good. But I wonder what they gave Cuties. And there it is. 4 stars, ladies and gentlemen. A certifiable classic. Cuties was by their standards. Why does none of this surprise me? Remember that the core fundamental heart of the woke movement is always to target children. They want access to your kids. It's not rocket science. So it's no surprise that a lot of these outlets went to war to protect their precious baby twerking simulator movie, but are appalled and openly reject a movie that protects kids. And for some of them to call it a conspiracy theorist movie? Really? Goddamn, those woke liberal echo chambers are something else, dude. I would love to infiltrate some of them just to see how unhinged and weird they really are. All I'm saying is, if some reviewer denounces Sound of Freedom, maybe we should check their hard drives. That's all I'm saying. But I love to see Freedom doing so well. I love it when woke mainstream media cannot ignore the success of rational thinking and pro-protection of children. All this movie did was expose how biased and creepy many news outlets are, which you could argue is nothing new. But even still, it is sobering to see these nightcrawlers get exposed in the light. Finally, let's talk about DC Comics' new film Blue Beetle, which is apparently, according to James Gunn, going to be the start of the new universe. But I think the real judgment of whether Blue Beetle is the start comes down to one thing, which is, will it be a box office bomb like so many other DC movies? If it does well, it's going to be in the DCU. If it doesn't, whoops, James Gunn will just never speak of it again. And so far anyway, it looks like Blue Beetle will be a bomb because its director hates conservatives and white people and thinks the movie pushes a pro-immigration story.
That's fucking awesome!
This is what I've always wanted!
Because you can't have a person of color main character without tying their origin to whatever stereotypical nonsense you can find. Angel Manuel Soto is the director of Blue Beetle, and they want the film to be an allegory for immigration because of course they do. Soto said, quote, "Though the film doesn't depict an ICE raid, it does include a scene that echoes one. Cord Industries invades the family's home in a scene that can play as just another dramatic moment in a superhero movie or be taken as symbolic of events that tear apart real families. There is a history that exists before an ICE raid, a history that includes traveling miles and danger and working hard, becoming a family, creating memories, and thinking that everything is going to be okay. And all of a sudden, everything that you have fought for, everything that you have worked for, everything that you have built is now burning. I needed the depiction to be triggering because it's the experience of many." End quote. Soto also has Susan Sarandon playing the main villain, who's the head of Cord Industries. She will play the CEO, who will, in her words, embody the white military-industrial complex. Sarandon even explains the movie and its hero as the first Latinx superhero, so they're even using corporate-mandated woke vocabulary to promote this film. Then, of course, there's the "Batman is a fascist" line said by George Lopez in the trailer. And basically take all of this nonsense, blend it together, and now Blue Beetle is in a real situation where ticket sales are down and the movie might flop really hard. And the director is begging people to watch the movie even though he openly hates people that don't look like him and promotes stuff like Latinx and victim mindsets. I for one will not be seeing the movie regardless if it's good or not, because supporting someone who openly hates me without knowing anything about me is woke ideology 101 to alienating your audience. Blue Beetle will likely just be another DC failure because it's marketing itself by saying the quiet part really loud. And that's that the people behind it hate white people and they think they're the devil. And they don't want your money or your fandom because you're white, even though many white people obviously have no connections to the suffering of Latino people. But that's wokeness for you fellas. Just promote a victim mindset and demand compliance, then call everyone racist and a bigot when you fail. It's a tale as old as the cast of Cuties, but maybe that's why liberal websites love promoting woke nonsense in the first place. Anyway, in the end, as you can see, the rational thinking public is winning more every day. Kathleen Kennedy is just ruined at this point. Protecting children is working, and racists with victim mindsets are going to learn the hard way to never attack your audience. Thank you for watching as always, subscribe for more in the future, and like the video to help the channel out. I'm Indy, have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one.
cool.
Very cool.
Very cool.